section where it tells you where I'm from. He put his handle on there. Is that for Instagram?
Yeah, that's my Instagram.
All right. So, Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am 22 years old. I got into this business at 19. So this is my first real job. And yeah, I've grown my business in a few different ways, but because I started at 19, there wasn't a huge sphere other than my friends' parents and my parents' friends who all looked at me like a kid. So I built my business on open houses, and I've grown it since to be a lot of sphere referrals over the past few years and some agent referrals too, although the foundation was always open houses. Outside of work, I like to go to Universal a lot. My girlfriend and I go. We just got a mini Australian puppy like 2 months ago, and I'm a huge nerd, so we play Dungeons and Dragons every week.
Nice. You're actually really smart. I grew up with parents who are in real estate. I didn't even get into it until I was in my close to my mid to later 20s. So you got a few years on me because you actually were smart and listened.
Yeah, and I didn't have any parents in real estate. It was just
smart enough to
anything's
jump
better
in.
than college.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can make a lot of money here doing the same thing a lot
Yeah.
quicker, right? All right. So today we're going to be talking about your VIP open house experience. What are you hoping that everybody takes away from today's class?
Yeah, so I want to talk. Darnell did a great job of covering the systems of setting up the open house, doing a lot of the preparation. I want to talk about what it actually looks like when somebody comes in. So treating them like a client, not just somebody who just walked in randomly, and then talking a little bit about how you want to cater your closing to the person. Um, not everybody's going to be, let's go meet at this appointment and go show another house. Some people it's going to be, hey, let's just schedule a follow-up call. And then I also want to go over what my follow-up looks like, because I think that the fortune really is in the follow-up.
Absolutely. Great job. So let's get into it. Let's talk about your first section, which you wanted to talk about making the open house guest feel like a client. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think that one of the difficulties that we have as agents is it's a little bit awkward when a stranger walks into the house. And so most of the time, when I talk to newer agents, or if I go stop into an open house just to see what other people are doing, it's hey, thanks for coming in. I'm Michael. Let me know if you have any questions. And that's the full conversation. And I don't think that that's very welcoming. I don't think that really invites conversation. Even if they do have questions, they're going to pull out their phone and Google it before they walk up to you. So really what I want to do is first diffuse the situation as quickly as possible. They're walking in. Darnell gave a great example of when you walk into a store. Hey, can I help you find anything? Nope, just looking. That's like an instinct. You say that kind of like a gag reflex. So I don't want somebody to come into an open house and immediately feel defensive. So really first it's diffusing it to, hey, we're just having a conversation. And then the same way where if I was doing a private showing with a buyer, I would give them a tour of the house, point out different things that might not be immediately obvious, or some upgrades that have happened. That our area, we're in Brevard County, is a pretty new area. So most of our houses are built 90s or later, and there's only so many builders that built it. So I know a lot of what comes standard in a house versus what's an upgrade. So the same way, if I'm working with a buyer, I would point out, hey, this is an upgrade. This would be an upgrade. All these things. I'm going to do the same thing with an open house client. So rather than walking up to them at the front door and just saying, hey, I'm Michael, let me know if you have questions, I walk through and I'm saying, hey, most people want to start in either the master bedroom or the kitchen. Where do you want to start? And they'll go, oh, we want to go to the kitchen. And I'll just walk them through and say, okay, this is an 11-foot island. And, I would just start going through as if it was a private showing. And by the time I've shown them the first room, it doesn't feel like we're strangers anymore. It just feels like I'm their agent and I'm showing them a house. And I don't do a sign-in sheet at the start because I feel like that's very off-putting to some people. There's a chance that they're going to put their fake information. There's a chance that they just don't want to put it at all, and I don't want to put somebody in an uncomfortable situation. So I just assume the role of their agent as soon as they walk in, and I find that that's a very comfortable experience for the person compared to the usual, do you have questions, sign in here. I'm sitting in this kitchen table if you have questions.
That's great. I know I don't let people do open houses at my properties unless they know how to do exactly what you just said, because I don't like somebody just kind of stalking or walking around or just standing at the kitchen counter doing nothing and just being holding up the counter pretty much. So the
Yeah.
fact that you're talking to them and assuming the role of their agent is smart.
Yeah, and I think that like I said, it just diffuses the situation.
Mhm.
People are used to before anybody goes and shops for a house, they watch about 100 episodes of HGTV. And so they're used to the house hunters. You walk in, they know that it's granite countertop. They like the experience of, so this is a granite countertop. These are 42-inch cabinets because they're used to the same HGTV host saying that 100 times, that when they're shopping for a house, they want to feel that awesome experience. And, for a long time, open houses were super exciting of, hey, let's get all the kids in the car and on a Saturday go to check out 4 open houses. And what a disservice to have them walk in and just let me know if you have questions. That's not what our role is. It's
Very
supposed to be a fun experience to buy a house.
good point. Very, very good point. I'm going to open take the second right here to make sure everybody knows if you're watching this and you want to ask questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. We have a producer who's amazing on the other end named Brett Bishop, and he's going to be watching for your questions in chat. He'll make sure they put them up, and I will make sure that we try and get them answered as soon as possible. Um, Michael, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So during this experience, and I'm going to call it that, an experience, it's open house experience, right? It's not just them showing up to a house and walking through it real quick. I would expect that you're trying to give them that experience like the HGG TV show. Do you have certain things there that you would put out to make them feel more at home? Like, do you bring snacks and drinks like a lot of people do? Or do you do the whole
Yeah,
cookie, the whole vanilla in the oven type of thing?
I do not. I did for a long time, and what I found was if I brought snacks, most people didn't eat the snacks,
Mhm.
and most of the time it would just cause crumbs and get sellers upset. What I've
Right.
started to do on other people's listings, I only bring water bottles because it's pretty mess free. On my own listings, I cater Chick-fil-A. I get 8 sandwiches and 8 things of fries, and most of the time I go home and bring it to my family because not everybody eats it, but if they're going and seeing 3 or 4 open houses, I want them to remember the one with Chick-fil-A. The reason I only do it on my listings is because if I do see that there's a mess, I can have the conversation with my seller and just say, hey, like I told you we would do, we had Chick-fil-A at the open house. There's a bit of a mess. I've already cleaned it up, or I'll hire a cleaner this week, like whatever that looks like, because I don't want to leave somebody's house worse than I found it. I found that there's a little bit of red tape when I do that on somebody else's listing.
Interesting. All right, so we got a question from Florida Homes for Sale. When and how do you ask for their information?
Yeah, so that's what I do is I kind of do that at the end. I find that a sign-in sheet gave me inaccurate information a lot of the time, especially a paper sign-in sheet. I know people have had success with the online ones because people are so used to typing in their information. Um, Although one of the things is I really work on mirroring and matching. So if somebody comes in and they just want the details, and I can tell they're a high D, they're going to walk through, I'm just going to give them the details. And if somebody wants to chat and they want that HGTV experience, I'm going to talk about all the upgrades. I'm going to talk about, oh, with this room, you could do this, or give them the different examples. And then I wait, and pretty much at the end of each conversation, there is a closing opportunity. It's not always going to be closing for a buyer consultation or closing for the next showing. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, it seems like we have really good rapport, and I hope I've answered all your questions. Would it make sense if we exchange phone numbers and started to work together? And for some people, that's relaxing to say, oh my God, yeah, like, you did answer all of our questions. Here's my phone number. Much more so than go sign in over there. And I find that when I do that, I get their real contact information. And the following week, when I'm doing follow up, I'm not really spinning my wheels as much. Because if I have 6 or 7 people come into an open house and 3 of them say, you know what, no, sorry, I don't want to give out my phone number, and then 3 of them give me their phone number, the 3 that do are going to pick up the phone when I call. And the 3 that don't, I didn't have to waste time following up with somebody that was never going to work with me in the first place.
Absolutely. Everybody's got different approaches to it, and I think you should always take the approach that feels most comfortable to you, so you can be your authentic self. Because people aren't going to see you if you're not being your authentic self, right?
Mm-hmm. And I feel like one of the things that that is a stereotype about agents is that we are always looking for the next piece of business, right? And it's true because we do want to grow our business. I do think it's important that you don't take on every client. If somebody is obnoxious during the open house, I guarantee you they're going to be obnoxious during the buying process and during showings, and they're going to, be a tire kicker, and that's okay. And so one of the things that I've always done in my own business is I only take on 4 buyers at a time. And I tell people that is I always work with buyers exclusively. I sign a buyer broker agreement, even though I know most people just go start showing houses. I work with 4 buyers at a time, and I tell people I'll still
What did
do
you
open
say?
house.
You sign a what?
The buyer broker agreement, the Florida.
What's that?
It's a guarantee that we're going to get paid if we do our job, which is so funny.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would never spend thousands of dollars on pictures and advertising for a listing that didn't sign with me. So why would I spend hours and hours of my time with a buyer that didn't sign with me?
Right, Michael. I
Um,
was actually being a little facetious, but would you
I
actually
know.
mind? Would you mind explaining a little bit, just in case some of these people haven't actually?
Yeah. So a buyer broker agreement is basically after you've sat down with somebody and gone through the process, done a buyer consultation, or at least you have good enough rapport with them that they're comfortable working with you, you basically sign a loyalty agreement saying that you're going to be loyal to them when they have a need within buying. You're going to be responsive. You're going to look out for their best interests. And then also in return, if they have a real estate question, they're going to go to you, not call the listing agent, not just go on Redfin. So it's a two-way loyalty agreement, the same way that with a listing agreement, you're always going to sign before you put your sign in the yard. It's actually a requirement to. With the buyer, it's not a requirement to. For myself, it is because I don't want to go do 10 showings with somebody that I know on the 11th might call somebody else. I just don't have the patience to chase people down like that.
Correct. And I also think that it's smart because there's this guy named Gary Keller who tells us every year at Family Reunion and Mega Camp, you guys are crazy if you're not signing a buyer brokerage agreement. So very smart on your behalf to do that. I have gone before at a desperation at the beginning of my career without having one of those and spent a lot of time with the wheels turning when they didn't need to because those people were not loyal to me. And I learned my lesson the hard way, and now I don't show without it. All right, so we got a question here. Do you hand out realtor reports and your business cards to attendees when they walk in?
I do not. I usually have a printout of the MLS. I used to do like fancy flyers, and then I found that people would grab the flyers and throw them away. So if somebody is really wanting the details, I have the printed MLS report. It has my phone number on the bottom. I've done just shy of 100 open houses over 3 years. I don't think anybody's ever called me from my phone number at the bottom of the MLS report. So if they want it for the information, absolutely they can take it. I don't hand out business cards because most of the time after the walkthrough and I go to do a close, either to get another appointment or to get their contact information, I just pull out my phone and hit add new contact, and I just look up at them until they start telling me their information. Because I feel like that's a lot more likely to get the real information. If I hand them a card, I don't think they're going to call. And if I hand them a card, they might be less likely to give me their information because they're like, oh, I've already got yours. I'll just call you.
100% agree with that. I actually did very similar. I learned to stop spending money on cards because people throw them away, and it drives me nuts. It's kind of like me going to the mailbox and pulling out that card that's in my mailbox and then walking by the garbage can and dropping it right in there immediately. So I started putting my own contact into my contacts, and then I'd ask for their phone number and just send them my contact number. And at the same time, you could just send them a PDF of the numbers on the house, right?
Mm-hmm. So what I do is I do have physical business cards. This is me. And then on the back is a map. And what I do is I usually bring this to agent events because I find that agents are much more likely to keep my contact information and put me in their database compared to a random person I meet at a Publix or Walmart who's probably just going to toss it anyways. So this is the one business card I use. I work with a lot of older sellers. It has on here that I'm your grandma's realtor because our area is older. So that's kind of a lot of my clientele. So if they want a physical business card, I give it to them. Most of the time, if somebody's just walking to an open house, I don't.
That's very interesting. That's funny too. I like that. All right. Do you advertise or door knock? Are you inviting neighbors over for your VIP showing?
Do I advertise? Yes. Do I door knock? No. On my own listings, I will run Facebook ads that I'm doing open houses. I did them on other people's listings for a while and didn't really notice an uptick in attendance. I don't door knock. Kind of what Darnell said this morning. There's a lot of things that you can do to get more people in the door. It's what you're willing to do. Open houses are something that I thoroughly enjoy. A lot of weekends I'm doing 3 or 4 open houses. Door knocking is something that makes me sweat and makes me want to rip my eyes out. And so why would I turn open houses that I love into something I don't love? I think it's efficient. I have door knocked before and more people show up, and then I hated the open house and didn't do one for a few weeks. So I'd rather make it an enjoyable experience. Kind of what he was saying this morning of I'd rather have 2 people come in and have great conversations than have 6 people come in and have bad conversations. Door knocking is not where I excel.
Okay, that's fair. And I think that's a good lesson for everybody is do what you love, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of different avenues in this business that we can do. And you said one of them right there. And it's actually our topic for next month is online lead generation, talking about Facebook ads and stuff like that. So running it for your open house, smart idea.
Yeah. One of the things I was alluding to earlier, and then I think I stopped to answer a question and didn't get to where I was going, was I only work with 4 buyers at a time. So how I was talking about catering the closing to the person I'm in front of, if I have 4 buyer broker agreements signed, I know I'm not going to sign a 5th until one of those goes under contract, and my transaction coordinator can take care of it. Because if not, I'm spreading myself too thin. Although a perfectly reasonable closing is if somebody's looking right now and I'm too busy to service them, just saying, hey, I'm actually not onboarding new clients right now. Although if you want me to take down your information, I'm happy to connect you with another agent in my office, and I can do a personality match and match you with the best fit. We're the largest office in the area, and I can make sure that you're working with the right person. And I've referred to people within my own market center just on that because I'm too busy and I don't want to do them a disservice of, yep, I want the next piece of business. So I think catering the close is super important. And also I can just, if somebody's a personality type that I know I'm not going to work well with, there's a chance I can convert them to a referral for somebody else, even though I know that that's not my ideal client.
That's smart. And then a question I have we'll get to this question in a second, but the question I have for you regarding this is when you're talking to these people about potentially taking them on, are you telling them that you have, like, maybe they're not needing to buy a house right now? Are you going to turn them down, or are you just going to drip on them? How are you going to take care of those people who are potentially maybe a couple months down the road and they're just kind of kicking tires right now looking at properties?
Yeah. That's exactly what I mean by catering the closing, is because somebody that's looking right now, I'm always going to attempt to close for either a buyer consult or another showing in the same day. I do what Darnell says, and I find a vacant house down the street that I know if I'm here till 2, I've got one scheduled at 2:30, and I'm just wanting to fill that appointment. If somebody's 90 days out, I'm not going to be like, well, I'm not going to get paid in 30 days, so I don't want to talk to you. Because that's, I don't want to give that reputation to realtors. I think that by and large, we do care about the result of helping people. And so I don't tell them, oh, I only work with 4 buyers at a time and you're 90 days out, so I can't help you. It's mainly just figuring out what's their next step. How can I help them get ready? For a lot of people, it's there's a knowledge gap between where they are and where they need to be. So having the conversation with them of how much money, what's 90 days from now? Is it that's when school ends and you're looking, or you need to save up for a down payment? There might be a gap where they think they need 20% down and they don't, and I can help bridge that gap and get them to their goal earlier. Either way, in that case, I would close for their contact information and say, hey, I want you to think on this house. How about I call you in the upcoming week and get feedback? And then also, if you want to just jot down some questions over the next couple of days about your process, I'm happy to help answer them. And I find that when I call a few days later, they have a couple of questions that they wrote down ready to go. And at that point, I'm already their agent in their head. I'm not going to sign a buyer agreement that's 4 months out, 5 months out, because then it limits what I can do now.
You sure you're 22?
Yeah.
You ask good questions. That's a very smart thing to do. That person who asks more questions wins, right? And you're asking questions, and you're asking insightful questions that do lead to results.
Yeah, and I am very lucky that when I got into the business, I had a couple great mentors at our market center who taught me the importance of, you know, 4 questions
Ask
for every statement
questions.
you make, basically. Like
Yep.
it shouldn't be this house is great, this house is great, this house, because then you sound like a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
Although, give them the HGTV experience of here are the different things in the house, asking them a question that's as simple as, hey, what brought you to this house? Was it the 4 bedrooms or was it the pool? And it might be, oh, we need a pool house. We don't care about the bedrooms. Well, okay, well, now I know that. And by the time I'm closing for their contact information, I pretty much know what type of house they're looking for. And because I go and tour houses every week and I've lived in this area my whole life and I study the market, I pretty much know what neighborhood they're going to buy in by the time that they're done at the open house.
And what do you mean by you go tour houses every week?
So if I have active clients, of course, I'm just going to do my showings with them. Although I don't like to be out of practice. So if there's ever a time where I either don't have buyers or I don't have buyers that are in town or the people are busy, whatever it looks like, if it gets to Wednesday or Thursday in a week, I'll just go pull up what's 2 vacant houses within 15 minutes of my office and just go show them to make sure that I'm always looking at houses because it gives me a good idea of what's going on in the market. I also do about half listings and buyers. So I want to know what are other listing agents doing for their clients right now. So if I look at, vacant houses, I can see, okay, are they staged? How do they show? This one's not even getting their place cleaned. Like I can kind of judge where I am in the market. Obviously, this is not a place to talk about commissions, and you can determine value based on what other people are doing versus what you're doing and kind of cater towards that. So I know what are other listing agents doing right now, and am I doing more to justify charging more?
Sounds like you're following the models and systems set forth by Ignite, right?
Yeah, it's funny that if you go to the trainings and read all the books and just do it, it works.
Yeah, it's better if you don't get creative and you just do what you're told. Other people have done it before.
And
All right.
I've been creative, it just doesn't always work.
I want to acknowledge the fact that there was a question put up. I'm going to save that question towards the end, and we'll answer that because I think it's a good question, but it also leads into next week's session. So I want to make sure that we do go back to it. We do have a question here from Scott or his office, and it says, Michael, on average, how many homes do you show to a buyer before they submit an offer and buy?
Average is a fun question. 4.8.
4.8.
I track showings. On average, it's 4.8. I tell people that too, and I track it every. I used to do every month, and I got busy, so now it's every quarter. I update.
Why do you tell them that?
Because I don't want them to feel crazy for liking the first house.
Okay.
And that's part of the conversation I have during the buyer consult is a lot of people will see 2 or 3 houses, and because we've had a long conversation on the front end, we find the right house in the first 2 or 3. And then your immediate thought is, should I go see 4 or 5 more to make sure that I was right? And what I've found is if you have that conversation on the front end, hey, we're doing these filters and we're picking the ones that look best out of your criteria, there's a good chance we're looking at the best house in the first 2 or 3. And I don't want you to feel crazy for liking the first house and wanting to put an offer on it. And when I tell people that, it's almost a sense of relief for them to say, oh, okay, like this is the house that I want. I don't need to go see 3 or 4 more and lose out on this one just to know that it was the right one.
Right.
Sorry, I think I read the question wrong. It was about getting it accepted, right? Not just writing the first offer.
Not necessarily. Before they submit. So on average, how many homes do you show before they submit?
I don't track how much before they submit. The average before they buy, like the one that they buy, is 4.8. So they might submit an offer, lose on it, and go buy the 4th or 5th one or 6th or 7th one instead. I just track how many showings it did with the buyer before they closed.
How about this one? How are you tracking those showings? Do you have a Google Sheet or something?
Google Sheet, yeah. I track all my pipeline through Command. The opportunities tab on Command is my favorite because I like seeing the potential income. It makes me happy every time I put somebody in there as a pipeline. Showings, yeah. Once I have an active client with a buyer broker agreement, they go into my Google Sheet. What I haven't done, and my coach has told me to probably start doing, is tracking clients that I show that decide not to buy. because 4.8 is probably not a good indication of how many showings I'm going on per closing. It's just how many showings I'm going on per closings with the buyers that actually buy.
Very interesting. And you said you have a coach, huh?
Yeah, of course.
How important is that coach to you?
Very important. I know myself very well, and I get creative if I'm let to it. So I need somebody to keep telling me to not be creative.
There you go. Hey, good job. So Google Sheets, and you're using Command, and you just stated something that you and I have to be best friends now because you said you like the pipeline, and that's like my favorite area because you can track everything there. I love the fact that you use that. All right.
Setting the potential and probable income. Yeah, it's just on the opportunities tab, you can put in with a client that you have an opportunity with, whether it's a listing appointment or just a buyer that says, hey, we're looking in 6 months. You can put in the likelihood that you think it's going to get to closing. I go in on the front end. I have my nurtures with who's hot, who's a watch, who's warm. And then once I've had the appointment, if I've signed the agreement or not, so on and so forth. And it shows the total potential income and total probable income. And it helps me with my goals because, I've got big
So
goals. And if I don't have a high potential income, then there's no chance of hitting them.
pop quiz, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
When you're looking at that pipeline, do you want your potential and your probable income to get closer together or further apart?
For me, further apart.
Yes. Absolutely. Everybody, when I'm teaching on that, usually thinks it's the opposite. They think it's supposed to get closer together. It's further apart. And why is that?
So I track it. I use the MREA numbers. So like I know, okay, if I have a buyer appointment scheduled, there's a 75% chance that they hire me, 75% chance that if they hire me, they close. So I think that's 63%, whatever. If I go back towards that, I know, okay, I'm going to have 10 nurtures to get a buyer's appointment. That's just about my number. So I take it and say, okay, if I have a nurture lead, it's at 6% chance to close. So the more I can fill that, the more the potential income goes up. The probable income doesn't happen until the appointment actually gets scheduled. Although if I'm filling up my pipeline like I should be, the potential income goes up every week.
There's the key answer right there. If you're not filling your pipeline up, then you're not going to have more potential. Therefore, your pipeline's not going to increase. So the answer is keep filling your pipeline, and eventually you'll get to the number you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I want to get back on track here. We talked about matching the close to the conversation. Do you want to say any more on that?
Sure. Basically, in my mind, there's 3 different types of closing from an open house. It's either I am closing for their contact information and setting a precedent that I'm going to follow up. It's setting a close for their contact information and setting the precedent that I'm going to refer them to somebody, or it's closing for an appointment. And I think that the 2 things that I take into account before I decide which close I'm going to go for is what their timeline is and do our personalities match. And I also, even if it's not somebody just walks in, they're ready to leave 2 minutes later, I'm always going to go for a closing because the worst case is that they say no and walk out.
Right. And one last thing I want to ask you before we go, and I'll go to the questions in the chat some more. You talked about your third point being fortunes in the fall. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, so I love MREA for all that it has. And the one thing I disagree with is the 8x8 campaign, because I think that we in this, in 2023, we have to be a little bit faster than 8 touches in 8 weeks. So for me, it's the day of sending them a text, thanking them for coming in, the Monday after, because usually I do Fridays and Saturday open houses. The Monday after, it's a phone call. If I connect with them, I set up the next phone call. But if not, basically it's a text the day of, a call that Monday, a call that Wednesday, and a call that Friday. If by that Friday I haven't connected with them on the phone, I just put them on a quarterly call, because when I started and I was less busy, the next week was another 3 phone calls. So I would send a text and do 6 phone calls before giving up on it. Now I'm a little bit too busy that I can't keep chasing leads, which is part of why if there's 6 people, I'm only going to get 3 people's contact information because I don't have the time to call 6 people over and over again if they gave me a bad phone number. Most of the time I connect with them in that first week. and then I set a plan with them while on the phone. So either it's going to be, okay, we're 6 months out, great. I'm going to call you a month from now, and in the meantime, I'm going to send you houses once a week. They're usually happy with that. If they're a month and a half out, it's going to look very different to say, hey, tell me a little bit what you're looking for. I'm going to send you some houses. I'm going to call you an hour. Let me know what your thoughts are on them. A lot of the time, all of the time really in the follow-up, I'm guiding them in a direction that makes sense. Most people are not going to volunteer for, I'm looking in 6 months, please call me a month from now. Although if I say, hey, you're looking in 6 months, why don't we touch base a month from now and make sure that all your ducks are in a row on planning and you're still on track for that. They're always happy with that. They're just not going to raise their hand to say that's what I want. Once I offer it, they're like, yeah, that'd be great, please. And then it's just a matter of, I use 4 Command Smart plans. There's a lot of them. I think they're great. I just don't use them all. So I use a weekly call plan where I call them once a week. That's for hot leads and warm leads. I use a monthly call plan that I use for nurtures, quarterly call plan that I use for my database, and then I have a monthly neighborhood nurture for anybody in my sphere that has both an address and an email. And those are the only 4.
What do you use do you have a smart plan made for the first week that you were talking about making those calls? Or is that just
I did, and then tasks started to pile up. So now I have it time blocked on my calendar that on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the morning, I'm calling the open house leads from the previous weekend.
Good deal. All right, so we're at pretty much our time. Is there anything that you wanted to share beyond that we maybe didn't get to talk about?
I don't think so. I think Darnell made a good point about doing open houses together with people. I actually do open houses alone occasionally, although anytime that there's a newer agent that wants to learn what I do, I'll either split leads with them or I'll do it 50-50 with them. I have done open houses with a lender before. I don't find them, I don't enjoy them personally because I feel like it's a little too pushy to be like, hey, get your house and finances sorted. I'd much rather connect with them, have a good conversation, and set that up later. Although I do think it's valuable to have more than one person because, like I said, it's all about making it a client experience, not just an open house show up. And so if I have somebody come in, I'm giving them a tour of the house. If somebody else comes in, I just briefly stop my tour and say, hey, I'm Michael. I'm helping these folks out, and afterwards I'll come in with any questions, and then I'll start the tour once the first people leave. Although if we have 2 people, we can alternate, and it's very rare to have more than 2 families in an open house at the same time in our area.
Very good point. And let's see, Crystal wants you to repeat the 4 smart plans you utilize for your time blocking and your time blocking.
Yeah, 4 smart plans I use are a weekly call plan, a monthly call plan. So the weekly call plan I use for any active client or any hot lead. And even if I'm under contract with somebody, I call them once a week just to check in and make sure that everything's going well in their mind. The monthly call plan I do for any nurture lead, anybody that's basically going to move in the next 6 to 9 months, I'm going to put on a monthly. And then I use a quarterly call plan. I follow DTD2 with my database. So I just go through and call people once every 3 months. And then I use the monthly neighborhood nurture built into Command, where it just sends people what's going on in their neighborhood.
All right. And here's a big question. You said you work exclusively with buyers. So what happens when somebody comes to you and say, hey, can you list my house? What do you do with those?
Oh, sorry. I don't work exclusively with buyers. When I work with buyers, I work with them exclusively, meaning I don't just do showings without a buyer broker agreement. I do both buyers and listings. I just don't take on buyers just to do random showings. I like to have an agreement in place.
So how many listings have you found that you can take on?
I have not capped myself because I haven't gotten anywhere where I felt like I needed a cap. Most of the time with buyers, it's very time intensive. I think the most listings I've ever had at once was like 4. So I don't think it was crazy. I would probably say I'm like 60% buyers and 40% listings. And most of my listings sell fast enough that they're not on my plate for a long time.
All right. And this question we've pushed off for a little while. So let's go ahead and answer that. And I'm going to help start with it because I'm going to tell you, when you're dealing with online leads, I do with them quite a bit. And one thing I should always tell everybody is online leads typically can go up to 18 months as their average. Okay. They're not online leads are not a instant gratification type of business. It's not like calling your database and just talking to people who know, like, and trust you. They're going to give you business. These people typically have no idea who you are. They just saw something they liked and clicked on it. So it may take you some time to get to them and also get them to trust you. So that really depends on you and what your process is. And again, typically it's about 18 months. So with that precursor to it, what is your suggestion on it?
I think that online leads are a great way to fill lead generation time if you're looking for a way to fill it. And if you already are full with Sphere and open house leads and agent referral partners and everything else, it takes a lot of time to convert an online lead. So when I started, I did a lot more of them. My first 4 deals were all rental leads that were given to me from other people in my market center. And I took that money and put them into online leads, and I had the time to call them all day. So I've spent about $1,700 in Facebook ads over 3 years in real estate, and I've had 4 closings for them. So my GCI was in ballpark 30,000, no, ballpark like 26,000. So it had a good return. It was also what I did all the time. I just sat there and called and called and called. And now that there's less time to do it, I spend less money on Facebook ads because I don't have the time to call them the 15 times it takes to have a good conversation.
Now, Darnell talked about earlier the ability for him to put signs out in front of each of those out in the streets and stuff. He's got like 5 before, 5 after, stuff like that. So the signs are important. And if you're going to run ads like on the open house, I think that's important too, because that's you putting out additional signs for that open house.
Yeah.
That online ad, every time somebody sees that, that's another sign that somebody just saw. So you're at least creating some credibility and trust along with that. So when they do, and some familiarity. So when they're driving around and they see your sign, they've already saw your logo and everything like that, it's gonna cement it in. So I think it's still important to run those ads. Maybe just be careful about, you don't have to spend as much maybe on it. I mean, those are just as good as those cards that show up in the mail. The only thing is you're probably going to see them more than those cards in the mail.
Yeah. And I mean, if I look back at how many impressions I had over spending $1,700, I mean, granted, that's over several years. So it's $20 on this one, $20 on that one. Would I take back that money? Absolutely not. I think it was a great spend. Right now, I'm now using Facebook ads more for exposure than I am for getting people's contact information. If I get 10 leads from an online ad, I'm probably not going to convert any of those 10 just because I don't take the time to follow up like maybe I should. Although if I can get one more person in the door at the open house because of a Facebook ad that I ran, I'm much more likely to convert them because I've had an in-person conversation with them.
Yeah. I've had a lot of people in the past tell me that they saw my ads and they started following my stuff on Facebook, and they felt like they're my best friend because of it. And I didn't really do a whole lot. It was all mostly automated, just going through and doing it. But
yeah, most of my social media, my Facebook, my business Facebook was ads. Most of my social media is my Instagram, and that's pretty organic. I put it on my handle here and invite anybody to follow me. I've got about 1,200 people on there, some of which I've never met. And then all of a sudden I get a DM of like, hey, you're the guy from Melbourne, Florida, right? Like, yes, good to meet you.
You're the grandson.
Yeah,
the grandson realtor.
Your grandma's realtor in Melbourne, Florida.
All right, so here's the last question, then we're going to go to our break and our breakout session. Some people put signs in a couple days before their open houses. If it is not an HOA or gated community, how do you feel about that, and does it get more traction?
I'm not a huge fan of it personally, because I find that the longer the signs are out there, the more likely they are to get stolen. And when I have put them out early, I haven't noticed a huge bump in traction. If I were to do it, it would be if I have a Saturday open house, I would put them out Friday evening. We're a very older community. And so the last thing I want is to have a bunch of open house signs and have an older seller, because most of my clients are older, and have people knocking on their door like, hey, can we come through? And they're like, no, it's not till whatever day. Because it doesn't matter if you post a note on the door. People are still going to be bothersome. And the idea of getting one more person in at the risk of ruining a relationship with the client, I just put them out right before. I put them out like Darnell. I get there about an hour before. I put out signs 45 minutes before, and I pick them up right when I'm done.
So know your clientele.
Yeah, our area is just older, so we don't have a lot of leeway with putting things out, and people get upset.
Scott wants to know if you follow what's recommended, which is the 20 to 40 signs per open house.
Yeah, at minimum, I'm putting out 20. Most of the time, I'm probably closer to 40. I do at least 2 on every turn, because some people might miss the first one, or it's just more eye catching if there's 2. One of the mistakes I made a lot when I was starting was I would route it from either my house where I was starting at or my office that I was starting at, and only do signs in that direction. Now I look ahead of time to figure out, okay, there's probably 2 paths to get there. Make sure to have signs on both of them.
I've heard before people just knowing where the traffic is coming from. Like if you're doing it on a Sunday, you know there's a church nearby, making sure you get the traffic out near the church.
100%. Or
if you're doing it in the
for us,
afternoon,
we
you
have
know
a
a
lot of new
school's getting out.
construction still.
Yep.
I befriend the builders agents and just say, hey, if you know a sale's not going well, can you send them to my open house? And I'll go, buy them lunch or whatever every time.
Nice. Good job. And do you have, somebody's asking if you have a photo of your open house signs. I would say the best thing to do there is follow him on Instagram, and maybe you can catch it there. Maybe you can go ahead and put that up. Yes, you are. You're a rock star. For 22
Thanks,
years
bro.
old and already getting this, you're doing a good job of following what your coach is telling you. It's a good job.